Good afternoon, YouTube. I'm Chucky2009 and it is freezing cold out here. But that's not what this video is about. Today we're going to be running some vertical up 6011. Now a few days ago I posted up a couple videos about how to run 6010, 6011 in position, and someone requested an out of position, vertical uphill video. So I figured I'd make one here for y'all. Now basically what we're going to be doing today isn't much different than in position, but with a slight side to side motion as well. So the motion we're going to be using is known as the inverted T. Basically you start here, go up a little bit, halfway down, side to side. Up a little bit, halfway down, side to side. Up a little bit, halfway down, side to side. Up a little bit, halfway down, side to side. That's all there is to it. We're just going to do that all the way up our welding joint here. So we are going to be running some Hobart 6011 here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Chucky2009, and tonight I'm going to be showing y'all how to do a 7018 Z-weave in the vertical up position. Let's get started. Now the 7018 Z-weave is a weld that a lot of people have issues with, but unfortunately, although it does have a bit of a learning curve, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty manageable, and it's an excellent skill to have because it's a common weld used on everything from scrap metal and farm equipment to 5G pipe. So, alright, first off, it is, as you can assume, a side-to-side motion that will form, you guessed it, a Z. Basically, you'd start over here, move across, up a little bit in the cross, across, up a little bit in the cross, across, back and forth, which forms, of course, a Z-type motion. What you're going to want to do is pause at the toe lines and move fast across the center, and something kind of like, as my high-tech multi-dollar welding simulator here. Basically, if I was going to continue this weld up, I'd get my arc going, and do a successful restart. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But basically, you're going to want to pause, move, pause, move, pause, move, pause. We're going all the way across the joint, as you can see, and we're only going up a little bit. I'd say, I don't know, about a half an electrode diameter works out pretty well for me. Some people like more, some people like less. That's one of those things that will really determine the finished appearance of your weld. Basically, just keep in mind that there are two schools of thought on this, and people always argue about this on the internet. You can do a few larger blobs, put a blob here, blob here, blob here, pause longer on the sides, and have fewer steps. You could say that sounds a lot better than blobs. Or you can just go really fast, not pause all that long, and also not travel up as much. So you're putting in a lot of smaller steps. Basically, your options are going to be put down a few very large steps going up the joint or a few smaller steps, and that's going to completely change the way your weld looks, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Basically, you are going to want to spend most of your time on these toe lines here, because the middle is pretty much just going to take care of itself. I know this sounds weird, and it is a strange concept to grasp at first, but pretty much just move pretty quick across the middle, because if you take as long crossing the middle as you do pausing on the toe lines, or really anywhere close to it, then what your weld's going to do is it's just going to sag. It's going to be a blob. You'll probably have some undercut. And keep in mind, YouTube, that if you don't pause long enough on the sides, you're going to have undercut. In fact, if you have that or a ridiculously excessive amount of amperage is probably what's causing your undercut. And if your weld's sagging, in a nutshell, it's because you're going too slow across the middle. Remember, YouTube, pause on the toe lines, move fast across the center, and the middle will take care of itself. But basically, we're just going to be putting in a 3-pass fillet weld here. Basically, we're going to put down our first pass, which is going to be a stringer bead, because we obviously can't fit a big weld in here, because a big weave in here because you normally put a weave on top of something else. And so we're going to start out with a nice stringer bead. I guess you could call it like a mini weave. And then we're going to put a smaller weave over the stringer, and then we're going to cap that with a larger weave on top of the first weave. So alright, let's talk about stringers for a minute. Basically, as opposed to a nice wide weave with side-to-side action, a stringer is pretty much just straight up. Like I said, I recommend throwing a little bit of side-to-side motion in there just to flatten it out, help prevent undercut. But it's a completely different animal than weaves. But like I said, we can't really fit a weave in there because there's really nothing to put it on top of, so to speak. Now, the smaller the electrode, the easier it's going to be for you to control. I know, back when I was in high school, if I remember right, we did the first 2 passes with 3/32 and 1/8 inch on top of that. Some places might switch that up, so we're just going to do one joint all the way out with 3/32, one all the way out with 1/8 inch, and you can pick and choose what you actually want to do in school or in the real world or whatever. Running, probably about a 5 or 10 degree slight push travel angle, not much. I mean, there's probably about horizontal, and that's just not a lot of push travel angle. And the other thing to keep in mind is you're going to want to run perfectly in here to 45 degree angle, because if you don't, if you're off to this side or you're off to that side, even by a little bit, whether you like it or not, you're going to end up favoring a side. Alright, next up, let's do our first weave bead. Remember guys, you're going to want to pause along the toe lines, move fast across the center, and the more consistent you can be side to side, and for pause and everything, the better looking your weld is going to be. You'll see we have good tie-in with no undercut whatsoever. Now, since we're welding vertical up and heat travels vertical up, I'm just going to come over here, quench our practice piece. Now, you don't want to do this on something that's an actual project, because what will happen is you'll end up making your weld brittle. But on practice pieces, whatnot, not a bad idea. Now, as you can see, I'm just going to turn up our amperage a little bit, because our second weave is obviously going to be a little bit wider than our first one. go, YouTube. We have that nice rippled structure going on. And again, if you look down the toe lines, we have no undercut to speak of, and that's because I paused long enough at the toe lines. If you are having undercut, which is a very, very common problem with this weld, just stay on the sides a little bit longer. And as you can see, our weld is not drooping, which is good because, well, here's what a drooping weld looks like. I'm not above showing the internet that I occasionally fail at things. As you can see, this is kind of blob-like. And we do have some side undercut here too. This is what happens when you don't stay on the sides long enough and you spend that time instead going down the middle. If your weld looks like this, well, that's probably what caused it. Another thing to keep in mind is yet another never-ending debate on the old interwebs is whether the Z-weave motion is a wrist deal or a whole arm deal. And what are my thoughts on this? I say try them both and do whatever you're best at. Now personally, I find that if I give it a flick of the wrist, then that puts more metal on the sides than it does in the middle, and vice versa. So, you know, if I need, well, if my weld is looking a little convex, if the last pass was, I'm more likely to do the flick of the wrist thing just to even things out. But, you know, if that's not a problem, then the whole arm thing works for me. But, you know, one of my buddies is the total opposite, so trying both and experiment with them is all I can say. Now, another thing, as you can see, I left the top part of this first weave exposed. Like I said, that is flat to slightly convex, but that's on the slightly convex side of slightly convex. So I did this with the flick of the wrist motion, which put the metal on the sides as opposed to the middle. It's not a huge difference, but at least when I do it, there's a difference there. Like I said, for you it might be the total opposite way around, but you know, just experiment with both methods and see what works best for you. Now with a larger electrode comes, well, a larger puddle and a larger number of amps to run it. Now another thing you're going to want to keep in mind is if you move too fast across the center, yes, it's very possible to do, and it's arguably just as bad as moving too slow. Well, maybe not quite, I don't know. Basically, how do you know when you're going too fast? Well, when you start over at this toe line, you got to move across to the other one real quick. You'll see your puddle just vanish. Like, it just disappears for a split second. It's here, and then you start moving, you lose it, and then it forms again instantaneously over here. Basically, you just plain went too fast, and you went so fast that your weld couldn't keep up, so your weld stopped here and then formed again over here, because obviously you have the arc going, you're putting filler metal down, and your puddle just kind of reformed. Now this is bad because it leaves a void in your weld, not like a slag hole or anything. Just, I mean, your weld technically stopped here and started again here, and there's going to be a little void in between. If you don't have that going on, you're probably not moving too fast across the center. Now, let's turn this welder up. First pass, I'm going to start out at 110. Now that's on the hot side. Like I said, if you've never done vertical stringers before, not a bad idea to start well below that. It'll just make things a little bit more controllable for you. And there you have it, flat to slightly convex, undercut free, consistent, and ready to be covered up by a nice weave. Alright, now, another thing to keep in mind is a stringer bead is obviously going to be a lot narrower than a weave, and because of that, because it's a narrower weld, we're going to be putting less heat into the material. And so to compensate for that, you know, when we do the weave, I like to turn the amperage down a little bit. So there's our second pass. And you know what I was telling you all about? You can have a lot of smaller vertical steps, or you can have a few larger ones. Well, to an extent, this is case in point of that. Now this burned 2 electrodes, and when I was using up the first one, what I did is I did not travel up vertically all that much compared to what I normally do. As you can see, I got a little bit of slight convexity going on here. But, you know, like I said, this is minorly different than how I usually weld. So this is what not a lot of vertical travel looks like. This is what a lot of smaller, quote, unquote, steps will look like. Alright, well, I'm just going to dunk that real quick, give it 5 more amps, and we're going to put in that third and final weave. Our simulated welding joint. These are the 2 plates here, and this is our existing weld, and our soon-to-be weld will hopefully be between this line and this line. This is where we left off, and this is where we're going to be starting again. So, you know, if this is what I was welding, what I do is I'd start up here. Now, that's another thing, YouTube. Whatever you do, you don't want to start just any random place off to the side or whatever, because that'll leave a nice, ugly-looking arc strike that can cause you to fail a weld test. That's, you don't want to do that. So, instead, where you want to place your arc strike is where you're going to be welding. That way your weld will reconsume the arc strike and it won't cause any problems for anybody. So anyway, I would strike my arc ahead of the weld, come back here, long arc to trace the crater. This will preheat it and help avoid that blob syndrome. Trace the crater and then form a puddle right about here, and then we're off. And just keep on going for another, I don't know, 3-4 inches of weld or 14 inches of electrode, and repeat as needed. Well, that's my third pass, YouTube. This completes the last of my demonstration. You know, this is something that'll really help you out. It's a very versatile weld. It is sort of a pain to learn, but once you learn it, like I said, you could get a highly trained monkey to do this, but again, it does have one heck of a learning curve. And so hopefully this video is going to help you out. I really hope you all have enjoyed it. If so, please take a minute to rate, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it.